We old guys have to have these pillows here. Help our backs. This is my son.
Oh, this is my son.
Yeah. Welcome. Exciting evening ahead with Doug Mills. And I'll get Doug to tell us a little bit about his background in a second. But there are a couple of people that I want to introduce before we do that. And one of them is Doug's wife, Kate Mills. Where are you, Kate? Stand up, let everybody see you. Just so you'll know, we have a monitor here that we can see the pictures, and then, of course, you can see them up there. The next person I want to introduce is very, very special, and it reflects back on my own Lafayette Jefferson experience. If you look up on there is a gentleman by the name of Bill Fraser, as he used to say, as an eraser, and he was my high school broadcasting teacher. But here with us tonight is Bill died, unfortunately, in 2004. You can see on the screen is a picture of Bill and his great wife, Barbara, who's sitting right down here. Barbara. Thank you very much, Barbara, for coming. We had a great visit this afternoon. I hadn't seen her in a long time. I've known this guy for a long time, obviously, because his wife runs our radio station. But I've also had the privilege of interviewing him on several occasions. And before we get to this photo, which he took, I want to just ask him a couple of questions, and we are going to have questions from the audience. So those of you who want to know something about photography or Doug, you can scream at him here in a few minutes. Doug,
how about it? What
was the first camera you ever owned?
Wow, first camera was a film camera, obviously, a Canon AE1 program.
Why did you have a camera?
Well, I started taking photography in middle school and had a class when I went into high school. I went to a place called the Career Center, the Arlington Career Center. So I went there for 3 hours a day to learn a trade. And then I went back to my home school to take government, math, English. And I talked my mom into buying me this camera. And it started then. And I just fell in love with photography and started shooting pictures in high school. And then I played sports, so I really enjoyed going to sporting events. And then I started taking pictures at sporting events. And I would cover high school basketball, football, anything that was moving, I wanted to photograph it.
Who was the first person that told you that you had a pretty good eye?
It's a great question, because there was a student that I hung out with. He also had a camera, but he had a much nicer camera. He had it for a lot longer. We went out into a park one day, not far from where I lived, and it was supposed to be a nature shoot for class, and I walked into this tunnel, that I probably wasn't supposed to be in. The creek ran through it, and I took a really cool picture there, and never said anything until we got back and started making prints. It's not like I could have shown it right then like we can now. So I made this big print, and he said, "Oh my gosh, that's better than anything I did." And I thought, oh, maybe I have an eye for this, I was like, wow, this is really exciting. And then when I started shooting sports, and because I played sports, I think that really helped me to understand the games that I was shooting and thinking about peak action and the emotional part, because I would always play and get very emotional and red in the face and scream and yell. And so I look for that when I take pictures now.
So you've been here for a couple days, been in some classrooms.
Fantastic classrooms, yes.
Kind of hoping, wishing that you get a degree from Purdue University.
Yeah, that's tomorrow, right?
This is all a part of the C-SPAN Center for Scholarship and Engagement, which is a part of the Comm School. And the dean of the liberal arts schools here tonight, Dean Reingold. I don't know where he's back there with his...
Thank you, Dean.
And the head of the Comm School, Mary Fran Matson, is somewhere out there.
Thank you very much.
And back in the back, you can't see her at the moment, is Connie Debley, who really kind of puts this all together. She spent 25 years at C-SPAN and is now here on the Purdue campus and shepherded the Mills through Purdue in the last couple of days. All right, this photograph.
Yes, thank you, Connie, very much. Donna, also, thank you for everything.
Donna?
So,
oh,
this
Donna
picture This picture really, started back in December, I think. I know it's hard to believe that it happened in February, but it really happened, I thought it started in December because there was an Oval Office meeting with Speaker Pelosi, Senator Schumer, Chuck and Nancy, as the president calls them, and the president. And we were, the White House press corps, all 13 or 18 of us went into the Oval Office as we do for a lot of photo ops, and we saw it on the schedule. We didn't think the press would be allowed in. And lo and behold, they said, "Where's the pool? The president wants you to have you in for this meeting." And we went in, and there was Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer sitting on the couches, and with the vice president there. And they started this normal photo op of, the normal back and forth conversations, and all of a sudden it got really heated. And it was so heated, actually, that I felt uncomfortable, because they were yelling at each other. Normally, you go into a photo op, it's very cordial, it's back and forth, it's yes, okay, good to see you, and then the press is out. And normally you hear the banter from each party back and forth from Capitol Hill to the White House. Somebody's on the Hill complaining about the president, and the president's usually complaining about somebody on the Hill. So, bring us to government shutdown, because that meeting was all about the government shutdown, and Senator Schumer kept saying to the president, "You're going to own this, sir. You're going to own this if the government shut down." And finally the president said, "I'm happy to own it." So that started this really contentious, bitter conversation. And then the government gets shut down. The State of the Union is delayed because of the government shutdown. There's no bipartisanship at all. It's very bitter. I'm the pool photographer on the night of the State of the Union, and all of my colleagues, there's one photographer who's chosen to be on the floor out of 7 organizations, and it was the New York Times' turn to be on the floor. And of course, all of my colleagues, all the wonderful photographers who are here from Indianapolis, would attest that a lot of ribbing goes on, and they said, "Don't mess this up. There's a lot of pressure on you tonight." So, of course, I'm sitting on the floor, the president comes in, photograph him going in, and then you go into this lull where the president starts his speech. For reporters, that's the exciting time. For us, sometimes you're looking around trying to make sure you're not going to miss anything, and then all of a sudden I could tell the president's tone. Started talking about bipartisanship with the speaker, and I thought, oh, something's coming. And then all of a sudden he kind of looked around, everybody kind of cheered, and then she did the little clap. And there was a lot read into it. I immediately thought that, what was being said there was very subtle, as everybody else did on Twitter and, the Instagram. So I was shipping my disc. So I shipped the disc to the editor who was upstairs, and I sent her a text, and I said, "Marissa, there's a picture coming. You may not have seen it on television, but I think it's really important. It was a nice moment." So that was it. And then I keep shooting, and I'm looking around, moving around, and then I get a text from her saying, "OMG, amazing picture." So I didn't know, there's a picture of me down on the floor, and I didn't know anything after that. She just said she liked it, so I kept shooting, and then came out of the State of the Union, and I'm walking down the hall after an hour and a half, listening to President Trump speak, and somebody walked up to me and said, "Wow, that picture went global." I was like, global?
And I took this picture off the New York Times the next day and shipped it out to Connie because we knew Doug was going to come here. I said, "This is amazing."
Yeah, I was so happy to see it in print. And
did you get a bonus?
No bonus. A lot of attaboys, but it's all good. I'm fine with that.
We're going to move to another incredible trip that you took. Tell us the background on this and your trip on Air Force One?
Yeah, oh, yes. So every time, I'll give you a little background about how we get where we go and so forth. So there's a small traveling pool that travels with the President of the United States, no matter who it is, on every trip. Every trip the President goes on, whether it's to New York, New England, East Coast, West Coast, or abroad, 13 members of the White House press corps travel with the President on every trip. And within that press corps, there are 4 still photographers. AP, Reuters, AFP, and the New York Times. We have a seat on the plane. And also there's a television crew that rotates, a pool television crew that can come from Fox, CNN, NBC, ABC, and MSNBC. So they all rotate. And then there are print reporters who are also on the plane, and they all pool also. So every once in a while, the New York Times can have also a reporter on the plane. They rotate, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, so forth. So, and we pay for that. A lot of people don't realize how much it costs. But for the New York Times to have me on Air Force One for an average year is between maybe $450,000 to $750,000 a year for them to pay for me, because it's not cheap. Like this trip when the president went to meet with Kim Jong-un for the first time in Singapore, that trip I think was around $56,000 per person who was on Air Force One. And not only is it just Air Force One, you land on the ground, the president gets in a helicopter and flies to a spot. We are also in another helicopter or an Osprey flying with him. So it gets very expensive, and this was an amazing trip. I mean, to see those two, I mean, we'd heard so much about Kim Jong-un, and obviously he and the president had Twitter wars for a while with Little Rocket Man, and I've got a bigger button to push, and a lot of stuff like that. We thought it was going to be very contentious, and even though they wanted to get together.
Explain these two.
This was one of those fascinating moments to me when they had met all day. They had come to an agreement and signed some paperwork as far as agreements about what was going to happen as far as denuclearizing and steps that were going to happen. And as they walked out, Kim Jong-un put his hand on his back, as it's kind of a little power play, I think. And then, of course, the president had to return that power play as they got through the door and said, "No, wait, here you go." So, as soon as I took the first one, I thought, "Wow, this is going to be a nice picture." And then when the president returned the favor as they went out the door, I thought, "Okay, we're going to have to stack these up, because this is like the power play there."
We have some video from the trip to Vietnam. This is only 13 seconds long, but listen carefully. The president is having lunch?
They're having dinner this night. Dinner the first night we got there.
We need to listen to this.
Everybody having a good time? Yes, sir. You are? I hope so. One of the great photographers of the world. One of the, to make us look very good. I'll do that. I'll work on that. One of the great photographers.
When I saw that...
My face is turning red, yes.
When I was watching that, and I said, there's only one that he could be doing that to. What is your relationship with him?
I have a really good relationship with him, and obviously I was flattered, but a little embarrassed. It's like, oh my gosh, the president's calling you out. What do you say? It was awkward. The reporters started writing about it, but my relationship with him is great. I mean, he is somebody who, from a photographer standpoint, can't go wrong. I mean, I always say we have more access to Donald Trump in the Oval Office and in the White House than I've had with any president that I've covered since Ronald Reagan. We are in meetings longer. We're in the Oval Office for 30 minutes, 40. The one with Chuck and Nancy was probably 30 minutes. We go into cabinet room meetings, and the longest I think now is 94 minutes, where you hear actually senators debating the president calling out members of his own cabinet when he's not happy about something. And he says, this is transparency, and that's what he likes. My relationship with him is obviously he follows me on Twitter. He retweets some of my pictures, follows me on Instagram. He looks at my Instagram stuff. He's asked me for prints. I made prints for him.
Any other president ever do that?
No. Nope, never.
What do you think?
I mean, other than, Bush 41, after 9/11, the pictures of the president that day, he asked me for a couple copies.
Bush 41 asked for Bush
prints
43?
of when Andy Card whispered into his ear.
You mean 43?
43, excuse me, yes, 43. My apologies, yes.
I could help you with math.
Thank you very much. 41, 43, and 45 now.
I graduated from Purdue.
I know. I did, clearly. Touche.
Let's move to July.
Everybody having a good time? Yes, sir.
Nope. I want to move to this. This is from July 16, 2018.
Oof. I can't see us sitting like that.
No. Tell us about this.
Well, this was another, meeting that was really hyped, and it was the first meeting with Vladimir Putin, or second meeting actually, but it was after, obviously all the Mueller report issues, the the Russian involvement in the election, and it was really their first meeting. We didn't know how much time we'd get to spend with them. Obviously, we thought, being a Trump photo op, it would be maybe 15, 20 minutes. It was not the case. We went in, they barely spoke to each other, and that turned out to be the story, that they ended up having this, sitting there, not really saying anything to anybody, and then finally the president reached over and shook his hand, and reporters were asking questions. Obviously, Vladimir Putin did not want to answer any questions, and the president obliged by sending us on our way.
I asked you this the other day, and I've always wanted to ask somebody, does Mr. Putin speak English?
I think he does, yes. I think he definitely understands it, because you can see when the president's talking, he will nod his head or know what's going on or look at him when he says something about him. I think he definitely understands it. And being a former KGB agent, I would not doubt that he doesn't speak English. I'd be surprised if he doesn't.
Kim Jong-un, did you hear any English from him?
But I did not hear him speak any English, but he's another one who I think understands English. And, he was, obviously, we were shocked in Vietnam when he answered questions from American reporters, first time that's ever happened. There were a couple of really good pictures from that too, and nobody thought that he would answer a question from the American media, and he did. And he talked about, he, of course, said some nice things about President Trump, and said that they wanted to work together. But it was shocking to hear him actually answer. And even the day before, when the president was asked during a meeting with Kim Jong-un, the president was asked by a U.S. reporter something about what was happening back in Washington with his attorney. And he was appearing on Capitol Hill. And the president didn't answer the question. And when we came out, there was a kerfuffle from the White House press staff saying, listen, we are not allowed to ask questions of the president while he's meeting with Kim Jong-un. And of course, the U.S. media were like, we don't care. We're going to ask questions. If we're invited into him, the president wants to speak, we know he will speak. We're going to ask questions. The next meeting we went into, lo and behold, they both answered questions.
The next one is a very recognizable face.
Oh,
July 13th, 2018.
great trip. Another great trip to see the Queen. I had not seen her in many years, and to think that here the president was going to be walking and trooping the line with the Queen of England was quite a moment. I mean, just say, she was giddy. She was smiling and laughing, and she's ageless. And to see them two together was, and he obviously got a kick out of it too. The First Lady got a kick out of it. They were talking quite a bit, and then they went in and had a private tea after they went by us. So it was, fascinating.
Speaking of the First Lady,
yes.
Look at some of your fellow journalists.
Ooh, yeah. So that's what it looks like in the Oval Office when the president is meeting with a foreign leader. That is the foreign press there. There are a couple American press there, but that's during a photo op with the King and Queen of Spain. And over on the left side of the frame is the president meeting with the king. And on the couch that I'm shooting from, there's two couches identical, and the Queen is sitting on the side I am. And I just looked over and I just thought, oh, the First Lady hates this. She does not look happy, and especially with all the screaming and yelling and all the reporters, and they were very aggressive. But yeah, that was one of my favorite pictures from that year.
Did any president or White House not allow you to scream and shout at the president in these situations?
No. It's a great question, because traditionally, back when I started with Reagan and even Bush 41, the White House press corps controlled the lights in the room. There were two outlets on the side in the Oval Office, and the lighting crews went into the Oval Office first. Two guys with big scoops, and they would walk in with lights. And then they would give them like 30 seconds to plug in, the lights come up, then the press corps would be invited in, and we'd all be sitting there while the president's talking or whoever he's meeting with. And then at the end, someone from the president's staff would say, lights. That was the term, lights. The people would unplug the lights go out. No, you couldn't shoot anymore. I mean, you were shooting film or you were shooting video, and when the lights went out, it was too dark to shoot. So that was our cue to get out. And now, we don't have any lights in the Oval Office. The president doesn't like lights being shined on him, doesn't like spotlights like this at all. So there are no lights. So now the word is thank you.
How do you like this?
This is great. I just feel now I know what it's like on the other side, but it's hard to see everybody out there.
Next photo is 17 years after 9/11 at Shankstown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, surprising moment. You know that obviously, I don't think the president was too happy about me when I tweeted that picture, but it was a picture that happened. It was on 9/11. It was a very quiet, solemn day. Went up and landed, and we were walking over, and there was a group of supporters and people waiting to greet the president, as there is at every airport. And he saw some people with some mega hats on, and was like, "Oh my gosh, there they are!" And he just got really excited. And First Lady's face obviously said, "Wait, this is 9/11." I ended up tweeting the picture out like everybody else did, and he was obviously criticized. Some of the staff said, "Did you really need to put that out, Mills?" And I was like, "Hey, it happened. It's what happened." So we're there to capture what happens.
This is a mega rally
Yes.
in Florida State Fairgrounds, Tampa, July 31st, 2018.
Yes.
You're far away from the center. How did you decide to go there, or did they put you there?
Well, what happens is normally we go, every president before and every president since Reagan, you go into the buffer zone, which is the area right around by the podium, by those steps in the center, and the photographers are allowed in there pretty much the entire speech. With President Trump, he doesn't like pictures that are taken from where you guys are looking up. He likes to have the photographers at the same angle. He started that during his campaign. So we are allowed in there about between 2 and 5 minutes, and then we're out. So then once you come out, you have a White House staffer who is escorting you around. And I said to him, "Hey, can we get up into the stands?" So then we have a Secret Service agent who escorts us around also to make sure we're safe, and walking with us to make sure we're doing something safe. So we walk up into the stands, and I'm allowed to shoot from up there. And the White House staff is great. Every administration is great. They want the best pictures from every event. So the more exposure, different angles that we can get, they allow us to walk around.
Looks like in this next picture you're up to no good.
Yeah, that was not one also because the president had said that there wasn't an empty seat in the House. And I actually got escorted up, and we were walking back around, and I remember walking with the White House staffer, and he was like, come on, hurry up. I was like, "Wait, there's empty seats here." He goes, "Oh, they'll be back. They just went out to go to the bathroom." Okay, I need to take this. So I tweeted it out. The reporters were writing about the fact that there were empty seats. Doesn't happen very often at his rallies. As everybody knows, he really fills up an arena. And I think they have learned and I think evolved, and you hear them the staff talking about the rallies sometimes are too long, that people have lives, and yes, they want to come and support the president. They want to listen to him for 45 minutes, but when he goes on for an hour and a half, people have to go, so they leave. And the people said that that's what happened here. There's a lot of empty seats, but I have to show that. It happened.
What about this next photo from Murfreesboro, Illinois?
Yes, that was a picture, another one that the president liked at first, and then the closer he looked at it, he didn't like it. And just because it's not the best angle on him, but the night that I took it, and I showed it, I was on the plane, we were flying back, it was a late night, and I had sent it out, it was on Twitter, it was on Instagram, which is something that, I do also, besides sending in the pictures straight to the New York Times. The staff loved it, and then the closer they looked, they were like, "Oof, wow, no, I don't like it," but it's dramatic. And that picture ended up winning this year first place in the White House News Photographers Contest, so I was happy with that. Yeah, I was very delighted. And as you can see, that little tape down at the bottom, that's on every platform when the president comes on stage. You wouldn't be able to see it from where you're sitting, but there's tape where off and on. There are amazing amount of toe marks, to make sure staff, the president knows where to go. Being inside the White House bubble is the most fascinating thing I do, because the logistics, as I was saying to some of the students today in one of the classes, You have no idea how much is involved when the president travels to your state, whether the vice president's not at the same level, when the vice president travels, but when we flew to Africa a couple years ago with President Obama, we did not land at a military base, and it was a really old-fashioned, old airport with beat-up old airplanes, and we landed there only because logistically that was the best place to land, and it was a refuel stop, so they let us off, and I'm standing outside, and all of a sudden these beautiful green trucks, brand new, start rolling up. I said to one of the Air Force police who were standing guard by the plane, I said, wow, my gosh, they brought in these brand new trucks, for this trip. And he said, Mills, they flew this from Andrews Air Force Base. I was like, what? All 4 of these tankers? I said, yeah, they flew all the fuel from Andrews Air Force Base to Africa to refuel the plane because they don't want any of the fuel compromised. So if the president does not land on a military base, they fly the fuel in to refuel Air Force One. They do not take any chances.
Next one, Mesa, Arizona, October 19th, 2018. Who are all those people right around him there?
Secret Service. That's we were being escorted out of the buffer zone, so to speak, at that point. There are a number, as you can imagine, there's a lot of, Secret Service at his events. There have been people that have jumped over the railings. There have been protesters, but it happens, with every president, but with President Trump, it's happened more with people trying to get into the pen. We have escorts now for the press corps. We had a guy who jumped over out of the stands and came onto the press corps, where the photographers were, knocked over a camera. So our area now is becoming more secure. It's unfortunate. Hopefully it'll, the rhetoric will die down during the campaign because I fear that that's going to be part of it. The White House is we've met with Sarah Sanders about it. We met with the Secret Service. They assured us that it will change, that they are there to protect us. They don't like it either. And they certainly don't want it happening.
We're going to go through fairly quickly and just get a quick comment because there are photos here besides Donald Trump. I just want to make sure those of you in the audience who are outraged at this point that Donald Trump has been manipulating the first 30 minutes, we have others. Not that anybody would be outraged.
That's a teleprompter. It's normally see-through. A lot of times when we go to these trips and the president's speaking, I can look right through that and you can see his face. But because of the way the sun was setting and it was getting at dusk and the light, and it just turned gray, and I looked up and I was like, oh my gosh. So I ran to the back of the room, stood up on a chair, and lo and behold, there it was. Now, I wasn't trying to make him look bad, but it was just a really different moment.
We don't know where the next one is, but look.
That's right there in the front. I mean, we're in the buffer zone, and these are supporters that are right up there who've been there for hours trying to get in, and then they are in the front row when we get there. And it's funny, you hear the fake news, people will yell at us as we're in there, and the last thing I never try and confront anybody. It's like, hey, how are you? And I try to introduce myself, and just take down the temperature. It's not worth getting in an argument with anybody about it, and once you do that, they realize you're human.
Do they say nasty things to you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, yeah.
They swear at you?
Yeah, of course. Especially with my New York Times ID on. Come on. Yes.
I told him that he could not use 4-letter words out here tonight, so we won't be able to hear that.
I mean, it's not every rally that it happens, but again, if there's tailgating going on before the rally, there's more likely that it happens. And there's a lot of tailgating because people take off their entire day to go to rallies. Every president, they do the same thing. It takes, if you want to get in the front row, you want to get in the arena, first come, first serve. That's what it takes. And so people.
Next one is Easter egg roll with the kids.
Yes.
In 2018.
Yep. All around the kids on the south lawn of the White House. That's an amazing event that's coming up in a couple weeks. I don't think I'll be there, thankfully, but it's because it's crazy. It's like a pandemonium. Kids everywhere, events going on simultaneously. But
what's with the hair?
Yeah, he wears a lot of product on his hair, and we can always tell. We can always tell if it's going to be windy. He'll have a hat in his hand because he'll put it on. Everybody said that was fake. I can't tell you how many people said that's fake, that's fake. It's not fake. It really happened. He avoids it. He laughed about it. He didn't like it, but it happened. So, you know, the reporters wrote about it. I mean, even Ivanka, you know, Trump told a funny story to a reporter about how long it takes him to do his hair every morning. So it's there. It's real. He says to us, hey, it's real.
What do you shoot pictures like this with? What kind of camera?
I'm
Not
using
this one, but the one before.
The Sony. I was a Canon photographer for 35 years. I started using Sony about 2 years ago and fell in love with them.
Are you still using the one without the clicks?
Yes, mirrorless. That's the Sony. It's mirrorless camera, completely silent. I can pick it up and take, you know, pictures of you right now, and then, you know, there it is, and where's Brian? Come on, there he is. So you don't hear a click. You can, as a photographer, being in the White House or being at any event, really, whether you're a wedding photographer, a news photographer, or here at the university, you go into a room, somebody hears a click, they look. You don't hear this. You're like a fly on the wall.
You were one of the first to do this, certainly on the White House
Yes.
photographers group. Anybody else move that way?
Yes, there are a lot of, it's trending. It's expensive to switch over. There's professional photographers who are here know if you put them in your hands and you use them, it's hard to put them down because one, you are completely silent. Nobody knows you're working. Other photographers don't know what you're shooting. I can shoot pictures and they're not looking, they don't hear the clicks and say, oh, what's Mills doing? Or what's he doing? Or I hear, you know, they're on a different angle.
You're not competitive, are you?
I'm very competitive, yes.
Black and white.
Love black and white. That's on my Instagram feed. I put a lot of black and whites. This was after one of his calls. The president, again, because we are in there so much, he spent a whole 20 minutes on the phone with the president of Mexico and had us in there. And this was at the end. And one of the reporters started asking him questions, and he was frustrated. And the phone call, I think, went okay, but the questions that came afterwards, and it just really summed up the entire, event.
Did they ever tell you, and the White House staff, that you cannot repeat something you've heard?
Yes. When you are behind the scenes as a photographer, which doesn't happen very often, but it's happened once. Hopefully it'll happen again. But there's not a lot of behind the scenes with the president, and thankfully, because I think he likes me and trusts me, that I was invited the night that Justice Kavanaugh was, the big ceremony in the East Room after he was confirmed in the Senate. I got invited up to the residence, and I was the only photographer up there. So I am only allowed to see. I heard a lot of things, but I can't run downstairs and tell the reporter what I heard. I can tell them what I saw, and I can show them pictures, but I can't really repeat. That would be not what a photographer does behind the scenes. It's not.
What about the hands picture?
The hands picture. The hands, I'm fascinated because, again, we're in there so long. In a normal photo op with the president, you would go in, the president would speak for 2 to 3 minutes, and you'd be, all right, lights, everybody, thank you, get out. President Trump, you're in there 30 minutes, 90 minutes, again. So you get a chance to really look around the room, take chances, photograph things that you wouldn't normally have time to do.
I want to go back to the last
45.
Yes. Does he always have 45 on his sleeve?
He told me I had a private one-on-one with him because he wanted some pictures that I had taken. He invited me in the Oval Office, so I gave him some prints, and one of them was this picture with the 45 on it. And first time that's ever happened. So I gave him the print, and he said, wow, I really like this picture. Why did you take it? I said, because we were in there so long, I had a chance to really look around and study you, and and all of a sudden your coat went up so I could see it. And I said, but sir, why do you have that on there? And he said, well, my tailor in New York made these and sent them down to me. And after I saw the picture, I ordered a bunch of more. So, like, there you go.
It's like Lyndon Johnson in the Hager Slack
right,
story.
Exactly.
The young people here would not know what I'm talking about. What's this?
So this is just, the president speaks a lot from behind a podium. That's a teleprompter. So it was kind of one of those not really exciting speeches, and went into it. It wasn't very visual. And then I started looking around, and I knew, okay, I get a tap on the shoulder from one of the White House staff. Okay, you've been in here 2 minutes. We got to move. We got to get out of the buffer zone. And as I was looking back, I thought, oh, so I looked at her, I said, just give me 30 seconds. Can I have 30 seconds? And she said, okay. So I looked up and I saw him, and luckily the reflection went through the teleprompter just long enough, and then the other photographer saw what I was doing. I was like, okay, we gotta go, let's go, come on. So we were out. You guys know what that's like, yeah.
Couple more black and whites. This one is en route to Fargo, North Dakota.
Yeah, that's the president. He came back and got a little testy with some of the reporters. And again, he was there so long, so I really didn't have to focus on his face. I could focus just on his hands and just try and make a point that he was not too happy.
What about the next one here? How happy is he here?
He was not happy. Yeah, it was an event that didn't go well, and I remember the reporter saying, "Do you have anything that makes him look really sad?" I was like, "Oh, do I?" So there it is.
How often does that happen when your editors say, "I need a certain kind of mood shot"?
Every once in a while, yeah, it happens. You know, I talk with the New York Times desk quite a bit. We have a national picture editor in Washington who will ask me, "Hey, Doug, you're going into an event. Can you look for Jared? Can you look for Ivanka?" Or during Obama, it would be, "Can you look for somebody else in there, one of the cabinet secretaries?" So yeah, there's a lot of, and then, depending on there's always stories that reporters are thinking about today but aren't going to write for 4 or 5 days. So I can go into the room and not just think about the president. I can look around the room and think about, oh, this person's on the hot seat, or this person is going to be doing something, announcing something later in the week that's, whether it's a Secretary of Education who's going to be announcing something, and the reporter's been tipped off by somebody on her staff, then I can look for that person and they'll say, "Hey, can you look for this person?"
I have a couple personal questions before we go to the next one. We're going to change from Donald Trump to others. How long have you been married?
Oh, 30 years, right, honey? 30 great years. I could not do this without Kate. I mean, she is so supportive when I travel. I'm on the road a lot, as you can tell, and there's nothing like having a supportive spouse who says, "Yes, honey, yes, it's fine. Yes, you can be gone another 2 weeks." And she understands.
Does she really understand you?
She is. She really is. She never says no. She's just like, "I understand. It's your job. You have to go." Sometimes when it's not convenient with vacations and stuff like that, that can be a little back and forth, but
yeah.
Kate usually wins that, which she should.
You have 2 daughters, their names, and where are they?
Ellie and Raleigh, both comms majors. One went to Virginia Tech, one went to the University of Vermont in Burlington, and they're 25 and 27. Both, any students who are out there, they both got their jobs through internships. I can't tell you enough how much and how important internships are. Get an internship, get in the door, work your tail off, make an impression. My daughters will tell you, I was, as Kate knows, job start, you're supposed to be there at 9, be there at 8:30. Job ends at 5, stay till 6. Stay there, work, make impressions, and that's how you get in the door. And both of them were hired through their internships. And it's all about internships. It's all about communications. It's all about having connections. If you want an internship, I'm sure there's somebody at Purdue who may be in the field that you're in. Reach out to them. Reach out to C-SPAN. I mean, there are unlimited amount of internships in this world. And I know that you usually don't start until sophomore, junior year, even senior, but start early. It's so important.
In 2008, how much did you cover of the Hillary Clinton campaign?
2008, I was with her the entire time. I covered her, nonstop, every day. And that's my relationship started when she was First Lady. So I covered her as First Lady. I traveled abroad with her, traveled to Africa with her a couple times. I knew her daughter, Chelsea. So she knew who I was. I knew there was not a trust, factor there. I'm not out to get her. I think one of the things that, meant a lot to me and does always, that the politicians and the people I photograph think I'm fair and I'm honest. Even the President of the United States, Trump, said that to me during our meeting. I asked him, "Why'd you have me in?" Why? He said, "Well, I like your work and I think you're fair." And there's nothing more you can ask from as a political photographer is to have that feeling to know, I'm not out to get you, I'm just here to do my job.
How would some photographers be unfair?
Well, they would constantly try and use their political beliefs to and show that in their work. Not necessarily bad pictures, but not necessarily always doing something that's not very flattering, or look for an awkward moment, look for, just have an agenda. And I don't have an agenda. And there are reporters who have been accused of having agendas. I know photographers who have been accused of the same thing. Unfortunately, it happens in any job, no matter what. And luckily, I am somebody who I really pull back. I can honestly say I haven't voted for a president because of that. I vote in all the other local elections, but because I feel like I'm going to be covering them, I can't do it. So
The next picture is a young lady that today is 16, 17 years old. She was 5 years old then. Why did you take this?
yeah, it's just one of the, you're in these town hall meetings, and a lot of the parents bring their children and drag them in. And that's sometimes how you feel as a photographer. You're like, come on, another town hall meeting, another one.
How'd you get her name? I mean, her name is Ariana Williams.
Because I followed her, watched her. She had a couple different expressions. And at the end of it, I went over and asked her parents first, obviously, if I could get her name. And they were about to tell me. And I said, well, maybe she can tell me her name. And she told me her name. So then she felt really important. And it was nice that she was able to at least have some sort of connection if somebody was there.
What about this next gentleman?
Oh, he was, he couldn't wait to get his hands on Hillary. Yeah. He was so excited. He was yelling for her for like 5 minutes, Hillary, come over, come over. And she was signing autographs, and he finally came over and, was kind enough to get down on his knees and basically, give her the, what they're calling now the Joe Biden hug, No pun intended,
What's going on with this next one?
People do the funniest things with their children. They pass them around to the politicians, and this one said, hey, can you sign my baby's bottom? I was like, what? So first I was like, sure, if that's what you want me to do. So, yeah.
The next one is with Chelsea and her mother. No, this is, I'm sorry.
From around, in another town hall meeting, just trying to get a different angle.
Did you see that photo when you walked in the room?
I saw the angle when I walked in the room. You walk in, you see everybody surrounded, and you look, okay, she's in the round kind of, that's was her style at the time, to be in the round, so to speak, and be in the middle and walk around rather than sit in a chair and talk to people or sit behind a podium. And so I walked in, the first thing I saw was, oh, I gotta get up. I gotta get elevated somehow. So then it means going to the Secret Service, and traveling with the president or traveling with a candidate like that. You have a press agent who is assigned to you every day. That press agent knows every photographer, every reporter, every camera, because they hand you a credential every morning. So there's eye contact, they know who you are, and you gain trust with them too. Okay, I want to go up there on the steps. All right, let me go ask my supervisor, because they didn't talk about it before we got there. So it's all about, there's a lot of communications with the staff, Secret Service, because you can't just walk around at these events, willy-nilly and take pictures.
Here's Bill Clinton, his daughter.
Yeah.
June 2nd, 2008, Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Yep, he would pop into the events quite a bit, and obviously he would steal the show at times, and Chelsea would come in too.
We followed Doug around in that campaign. Here's a couple of minutes just to want to show you what it looked like when wanted to show the audience what it was like for a photographer to cover one of these events.
We will use that to help middle-class families as small businesses afford health care. See, I think that's a good deal for America, and I intend
This was
to use that.
town hall meeting.
Implementation of No Child Left Behind was
Do you always wear a hat?
extremely poor.
I'm bald. I get sunburned in this kind of light, so. Yeah, I wear a hat. Kate gives me a lot of good.
Anybody worried about you walking through the crowd like this?
No, not back then. It was, it was a lot less, there's contentious or, now, as I said, we walk through crowds now at a Trump rally. The agent comes with us, the staff comes with us, and they put up bicycle racks, so there's not a lot of interaction between the press. I go back to Bush 41. There was, a big camp. The media was the enemy. Then too, for a while, ignore the media, vote for Bush. Obama, we went through a time too with Obama in the press corps. Don't laugh at the mustache, please, here. Thank God it's gone.
Hilarious.
And so, yeah, I mean, a town hall like this, not the president, it's a little easier to move around. Once they get into the White House, everything changes.
On to another president.
First guy I covered, right there, Ronald Reagan. I pinched myself when I covered him the first time. I covered his re-election campaign in '84. I started with him in '83 for UPI. He was another guy who got on the stage and lit it up. You know, he was very photogenic. I talk about, you know, everybody always asks who's the most photogenic president. I thought early on, halfway through my career, he was. And then Barack Obama showed up, and I thought, my gosh, he's the most photogenic politician I've ever photographed. Perfect teeth, perfect skin, perfect figure, just, you know, you couldn't take a bad picture of him. He made funny faces every once in a while, but he always, you know, looked great. And then when Donald Trump came in, I said, this guy is the most iconic. You can't take a picture of that guy and look at it and not know it's him. So Reagan was great to cover.
Where was the summit for this picture?
That was in Russia, yeah, in Moscow. First time I'd been to Moscow, I think in, gosh, '86, something like that. Amazing to be sent that young, 26 years old, to go over to cover a summit like that for UPI. And actually, I think I was with AP. Sorry, I was with AP during that time. So yeah, amazing to go over to a first time I'd ever been to Moscow. Obviously, had not traveled abroad as a teenager and didn't have that luxury. So all of a sudden now I'm jet setting with the president, which is pretty fascinating. And to get on a subway car and, you know, first thing was I got to the airport, took a taxi in with our reporter, and he gave me an address and said, see you later. You know, you get on a train in Moscow, nobody speaks English. You're the only American on the train. Everybody's looking at you because you're wearing blue jeans and tennis shoes, and they're like bartering me, wanting to take my pants and my shoes and trading. You know, we'd like to have those. I'll never forget that. I felt like an alien on the subway. But yeah, that was an amazing trip. First big trip.
Want to go to questions right after the next photo. We've got others to show you, but I want to give the audience a chance to get involved and ask questions. This is a picture, I remember it.
Oh, his final day in office, yeah. I'm not going to get teared up, but I mean, he was the first president I covered. It was an emotional day for him when he left. They told us that morning, hey, President, you're not going to see the president at all. He's not going to have anything in the Oval Office. He's just going to come down. He's going to sign a couple pieces of paper. And the next thing you'll see is George Bush coming into the Oval Office later today. So I got assigned to go there to see it. I thought, oh gosh, we're not going to see him at all. And then all of a sudden he invited the press in. And we went in, the desk was completely empty. The Oval Office was pretty much empty. And it was an amazing time. So then he's walking down and waving back to the staff, waving goodbye. And then the next time he really came to Washington was for his funeral.
And we might as well show that picture of the funeral.
Where he was lying in state of the Capitol. And yeah, getting up to that position back then was a lot harder. You had to first get an escort, get permission to get up there. And the steps went on the outside of the Capitol, where you went outside for a little bit, then you went back inside. And then once you get up there, it was like, take everything off. No hats, no glasses, nothing around your neck, credentials down on the floor, because you're basically leaning over in the rotunda. And if you're afraid of heights, that is your worst nightmare, because you feel like you're going to fall over, even with the railing up to your chest. But standing up there and looking down on that, it was just an amazing sight.
And then you have the last picture in this series with Mr. Gorbachev at the funeral.
Yeah, that was, I mean, how classy of him to come. He was obviously no longer the president of Russia, but he came over, and yeah, it was an amazing time to be there.
Who has a question? We have two microphones. Zach, where are you? Or Jordan? We have, I can't see who's that. Jordan over here. Who's got a question? Anybody over here? We got a couple down in this. Oh no, Jordan is over here. Okay.
Hi, my name is Jake Jenkins. I'm a senior here. I graduated in 4 weeks. I'm in public relations and art history, so I've taken classes in the comm school here. I don't know if you followed me on Twitter a year ago. And I don't know
Excellent.
if you've
Perfect.
coolest moment of my entire life.
Sweet.
I don't know if you've seen anything that I've posted about this, but I've written a lot about photography as truth and the image as truth.
I have, yes.
How do you feel that and photojournalism as a whole plays a role in like fighting against this concept of fake news?
Oh my gosh, it's a great question. It is, because it's something that people ask me all the time about how much Photoshop do you do to your pictures? Have you ever, taken somebody out, or, and as professionals who are here, that is the biggest no-no in the game. I mean, we can lighten and darken, and that's about it. I mean, there could be, something on somebody's face. Like the president can have a hair, one of those crazy, and it can be right across here. You can't move that. And if the New York Times or AP or anybody else found out about that, you'd be fired within minutes. So it is a struggle, because so many apps now, you can go into your iPhone and take somebody out. You can put yourself in a scene that you're really not there. And I think, I had a talk not too long ago, and the question came up about, looking at news sites and where do you get your news? And obviously I was, touting the New York Times and AP, saying that's where if you see something that's not right, or you see something that you question, go to a legitimate news site and see if it's true. Because it happens. There's so much fake news out there. I know the president calls out, the fake news media all the time. And honestly, the New York, I'm offended by it. I've told his staff that I am. It infuriates me because that's not there's nothing that I do that is fake. And the reporters at the New York Times feel the same way. They're not writing about things that haven't happened or didn't happen. And when they get a source, the New York Times reporters, their editors drive them crazy because they need 2 or 3 sources, sometimes 4 sources, before they'll ever publish a story. And there are news organizations that get out ahead of it because everybody wants to be first. And that's what, kills us all. Because when something comes out first and it's not right, and if it's on Twitter and it's crazy, it just it blows up. And so then to try and reel that back in after it's already out of the barn is so hard. So when you see something that's not right, the first thing you do is call it out. So I appreciate all the work that you do, because it means a lot to all the professional photographers who do this every day. We're not going to change anything in our picture. The most we'll do is lighten and darken, put a little saturation in them, crop them. We may crop them tighter than some people would like, but that's wire photography. It's in my DNA, because I worked at AP for 15 years. I like to crop tight. I like emotion. So it's, if you're not paying for it in news, there's a good chance what you're looking at, it may be fake. So
Let's go over. Is somebody over here? Gentleman right here.
Good evening.
How are
My name is John Hannigan. I'm a Purdue dad.
Congratulations, John.
Thank you.
Must be very proud.
I am. I have a question about your work and how you use technology today.
Great question. Yeah.
To what extent do you use multiple exposures on the same shutter release press?
Never.
Thank you.
Yep. No multiple exposures. I was showing in the sports class this morning a picture where I took Michaela Schifrin with this new Sony camera. I took like 100 frames of her going by me, and it was the first Olympics using this camera, so I shot like 100 pictures of her going by, trying to make the camera fail, because I'd never used it in that situation, and trying to have an out of focus frame, and every frame was sharp. And so when I showed it to one of the photo editors at the Times, they said, "Oh my gosh, we got to put these all together. It's not a double exposure," but they sandwiched them all on using a program. So she is basically, I think it ended up using 60 frames in a 2-second period of her race. And that's the extent of anything like that we do. And technology, as far as what we do every day, it changes so fast. It used to be process film, make a print, put it on a drum, send it out, take 8 to 10 minutes. We are now having Ethernet cords plugged into the side of our cameras. At the Olympics, at the Super Bowl, as AJ over there shot the Super Bowl, he was a freelancer for us for the New York Times. Darren, everybody else was over there shooting Ethernet cable in. The most important thing you do is get a picture, and then it's transmitted directly from your camera. So it's how fast technology works. You can have an Ethernet, go straight to the New York Times. And if you don't have an internet connection that way, I carry around a MiFi. So I have a hotspot in my pocket, and I'll put a caption on another card, load it into my camera, and then load that caption onto the picture. So every picture that I take after that, that caption gets attached. So if the president's speaking in the Rose Garden and it's on deadline, I can have that picture and I can fire it up and I can send it directly from my camera 2 seconds after he comes out. It takes about 15 seconds to get to the New York Times, and it's on the web within minutes. You know, during the Olympics, we're shooting race swimming, and I can take a picture of Michael Phelps jumping off to start a race. The race may last 2 minutes. By the time he gets to the finish line, we already have a picture on the web. That's how fast it is now. And with pictures, you can do that because they don't lie. You know, the reporters don't have to source it. You know, it's right there, it's real. So the technology has changed, and obviously Twitter and Instagram has added another thing to our plate. I get to edit all my pictures on a day when I'm traveling with the president. I choose the ones that I send in the New York Times. AP photographers do the same thing. We're our own editors, photographers, technicians, you know.
Doug, is it okay? I'm going to send this to the New York Times
Perfect.
to make sure that
It'll be there right away, right?
Can you gentlemen you work with, it'd be fun for the audience
Please
to meet.
stand up, guys.
Yeah, stand up, you professionals over here. Zach, get a microphone over here. I want these folks to introduce themselves. Tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm AJ Mast. I'm a freelance photographer out of Indianapolis, and I've been fortunate enough to work 7 or 8 Super Bowls with Doug.
Yep.
So I get to see him once a year, and it's honestly, he's the nicest guy in photojournalism.
Oh, that's nice.
And we were trying to think of who else we would drive an hour to come see, and we couldn't come up with anybody else. Just him.
Very nice.
And I'm Mike Conroy. I'm a photographer for the Associated Press in Indianapolis, and have known Doug for a long time.
Darren Cummings, photographer at the AP in Indianapolis, and Salt Lake is the first time I met
That's
Doug.
true. We worked at the Olympics.
And
Yep.
seen him in several events since then.
And I admire these guys so much, not only for coming, but working with them. They are incredible photographers who could be up on this chair doing the same thing, showing you their work. And flattered you guys are here. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you
Says a
very
lot. It really does. And what you guys do every day.
Who has a question for Doug over here? Yes, sir.
Hi there. My name is Charlie Wu. I'm a freshman in engineering. A lot of photographers are caught up in like tragic and personal events. So how do you balance capturing the moment while being sensitive to the situation?
Really good question, Charlie, because there may be some pictures from funerals that we end up photographing. A lot of times when I show pictures from a funeral, very emotional moments, just know that we are invited there. Every funeral that happens at Arlington Cemetery, and probably every funeral that every photographer is ever invited to, it's up to the family to include the press to come. And every member of the family has to check this box that says no media or yes media. And once they click check yes, then we get an email about the funeral. We're invited. We are designated in certain areas that we can shoot from. Obviously, there's no interaction. We're probably from here to the exit side in the back, sometimes further away. So situations like that are really hard. You become emotional. I went to Katrina, another tragic time, and saw people that had been deceased. Had to photograph them to tell and show you guys what was happening. And you always, as a photographer, always think about when you're in that moment, you know how tragic it is, you have to show people what's happening and what has happened and why. And when you're riding around in Katrina and there are bodies literally in the streets and they haven't been picked up and they've been there for days, something's wrong. And the government has to do better at that. And for me to be able to show that, the New York Times to put it on in the paper, they were, there are a couple pictures that I showed one of them this morning, really sad about a woman who had died at a church in New Orleans. She had been there 6 days, never found. She obviously went up from the water, climbed up into the top of this church, went out on a balcony. She died out on the balcony waiting for a helicopter to go over, and she died right there. And I stumbled, I was rowing a little boat through, and I saw a big circle on the front door of the church that had an X through it, which means they have checked it. There's nobody here. If there was, if somebody had been found there, they would have put a 1 or a 2 and said that they'd recovered people from there, and it was already checked. So I was paddling around the back of the church, and I got kind of caught in between a fence and a car, and I looked up and I saw what I thought was a hand. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, that's not a hand. So then I stopped, and I was with another photographer from Getty, and I said, do you see that? He said, no, what are you talking about? So I said, wait a minute. So I climbed out of the boat, went up, walked up the steps, and I just, I was just in shock. So I felt horrible to take the picture. I felt like I was infringing upon this family, this poor woman who had died here, and she was basically in her underwear, and it looked like she'd been there 100 years because it was so hot, and had her cane still in her hand. And when I sent the picture into the paper, of course, my phone lit up. It was like, wait, you need to come back and see a psychologist. This is really dramatic. You're seeing stuff that normal people don't see. But I had to send the picture in, and we didn't. All we used in the picture was the photo from below where you could see her hand. But thankfully for the reporter, because the reporter saw the email chain that went around about what I had seen, the reporter contacted me that night in the hotel. He came over to the hotel, looked at the pictures, and said, I'm going to make it my mission to find out who this woman is and to get in contact with her family. 7 months later, he found out who she was and found out who her family was. They were now in Georgia. And they went through, he made a point of finding out through her dental records, because in the picture you could see she was missing a tooth, and that was his key through the police, but there was nothing in the church. So those sort of things really shake you. And it bothers me now to look at the picture, but I knew without that picture, this family would have never known what happened to their mother, grandmother, and they just thought she disappeared. They had no idea what happened to her.
Who has another question? One down here, one over here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Anush Kazim. I study fiber in the gut microbiome in the food science department. I guess one question. I have a lot of questions, but I'll just do one. That's fine. So there's a phrase called starving artists, and I think in the scientific community we have starving scientists who we have these brilliant ideas, and we kind of maybe I'm just talking about myself here, but Moe Brown campus, and it's a great idea. We have data and everything, but we're out here kind of begging for money a little bit, whether it's the big grant making institutions. When it comes to, I guess, particularly to the question, navigating your career as an artist and I guess as scientists that are kind of similar.
Right.
How much do you build, I guess, your personal brand as a creative person who thinks outside the lines, pushes the envelope, and how, I guess, in a changing landscape, whether that's higher education research, or which is getting more and more competitive, or photography, which is now infinitely competitive. How do you build, maintain, and separate yourself in that dynamic so you don't become a starving artist or scientist?
It's a really good question, because I think obviously it's very competitive. My colleagues down there know how competitive it is. Branding yourself. I think it's more about just having a reputation and having a quality reputation so people respect you, treating other people with respect, and studying other photographers' work. That's something I love to do. When I was at AP, that's all I did. I looked at the wire all day long to try and get better. and to see what other photographers were doing. And I think the other thing that has really taught me since I went to the New York Times was to take chances, to look outside the box and to go to a sporting event and say, all right, I see where all the other photographers are. I'm going to go somewhere else and try something different. I have that luxury.
Let me interrupt at times. We want to show some of your sports pictures because you're headed toward the Masters.
Yes, next week. Yep.
Ever been there before?
I've been there. I went there twice for the AP, and for the New York Times, I haven't been there yet.
Now, I don't think we really care a whole lot about Georgetown, but here they are.
Yeah.
Why this picture?
Just, you know, it was one of those sports pictures where a lot of times sports editors will say it's got to have a ball in it. It's got to have a ball in it. Where's the ball? Hey, where's the ball? This doesn't have a ball, and it told the story without having the ball in it. Didn't matter whether he made it, but it was a contact play. It was near the end of the ball game, and
what about this Super Bowl picture?
Again, you know, it's just
there's the ball.
Yeah, there's the ball, but normally it's all about Brady. This is all about the hunt for Brady, and trying to get the defensive perspective on it. And
did you hear what he did on April Fool's Day?
Yeah, I'm sure you heard. He went on Twitter for the first time and opened up a Twitter account and said he was retiring on April Fool's. Yeah, and it was a joke.
Here's one from 2008 Beijing Olympics, women's hurdles.
Shooting the hurdles, and she caught the gate, or and with her foot, and that cost her the race. That's how, when you get the Olympics, it is milliseconds that can cost you a race, and that cost her the gold. I think she finished 4th or 5th.
How far away are you from her?
I'm probably from here to the exit sign, maybe a little bit further. That's probably shot with a 600, shot from down in a photographer's moat at the end of the finish line. And I was working for AP when I shot that, so.
Where's this next photo from?
Oh, great story, long story, but I'll try and shorten it down, Kate, don't worry. This is from the Olympics in Atlanta, and Bob Doherty was the photo editor, sports photo editor, one of the legends at AP, and somebody I admired. And he put me on the finish line, and I was a young kid. And he's, you know, of course, gave me the talk, don't screw this up. And so at the Olympics, you have a lot of remote cameras, and you're in a well. And so I did not shoot that with the camera I was holding. I shot it with a remote camera. And at the Olympics on the 100-meter dash, or this was 200 meters, excuse me, there were probably 150 photographers there. AP probably had 8 or 10. And I was at the finish line, and I was in charge of the remotes. And I had all these remote cameras. And as soon as the race was over, it was take the film out, put them in a bag, ship them in. Bob Doherty's in there looking through all of them. And I walk in after the race thinking, oh, I must have had something really nice. And he looks at me and he said, kid, I asked you to not screw it up. And I was like, oh, wow. He goes, I don't have anything from you that I could use. And I sunk, completely sunk to the ground. And I was like humiliated. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never coming back to the Olympics again. And then all of a sudden somebody said, Bob, there's one more roll from the finish line. So he looked through and he was like, stop, he yelled, stop, because then we were making prints. He yelled at the darkroom, yelled, everybody stop what you're doing. And he said, here it is, I got it now. So he looked at me and he goes, okay, you'll come back next time. And I was like, oh my, I still get chills because I remember looking at his face and thinking I had let him down. And then I didn't see the picture. He said, just go away, you got it, you got it.
What about the picture of the divers? No, we got the wrong one. Yeah, that one.
So this is we're at the Olympics shooting diver after diver, synchronized diving, and it becomes a little mundane, and so it's like, all right, can you take chances here again? Trying to do something different. I thought, what happens if you slow the shutter speed down? And lo and behold, it looks like 2 blobs flying through the air. So it's just about taking chances and shooting at slower shutter speeds.
Speaking of Mr. Phelps.
Yeah. Not an ounce of fat on that body, right?
Not many
just
clothes
like us.
either. Huh?
It's just like us. Yeah, Olympic. He was So much fun to photograph. Each Olympics that I went to, pretty much guaranteed a gold in something.
What's this one?
This is a picture. They have windows at the bottom of the pool. And for diving, I had never done it, never thought it would be a picture to go down and look at, because everything's up. You see these guys flipping, and that's where all the pictures are. And so I asked the photo marshal, which you have to build a relationship with at the Olympics, and I asked him if I could go down and shoot from the window and watch the divers come down. And I shot it for probably 30 minutes at a normal thousandth of a second. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this looks terrible. It was not really. So then I thought, I wonder what happens if I really go up to like 5,000th of a second and push the ISO up as much as I can. And when they started diving, I could start to see their skin like ripple. I mean, these guys are cut and not an ounce of fat on them. And then when I looked at it, I was like, oh my. So I stayed down there an hour, just trying to get the right moment. And this was probably the third guy that went down. And I looked at it, I thought, oh, I got to keep trying this, but it never got as good as that.
Let's just look at just take 5 seconds to look at a bunch here, and then we'll go back to politics for a minute.
Ouch. Yeah. Poor thing. This is getting up early, Olympics. This is one of those where I climbed, at the Winter Olympics. This is where I shot it from.
That's you.
Yep. The picture before was what I shot in this position. Again, the Winter Olympics is the hardest thing I do ever. I have to train for it. I really put on a backpack with 35 pounds on it and walk in my neighborhood up and down hills, because during the Olympics, that's all you do. You walk around with a backpack on, with a lot of cameras. You have to be in shape. I'm not as young as these guys, so I have to really make sure that I'm in shape. You get on a chairlift, you get to the next, you ski to the next lift, go up, and then I hiked up 45 minutes to get to that position. And I'm up there hours before the race. My backpack had 3 bottles of Gatorade. They were all frozen solid when I got up there. But once you get up there and you look at that view, you're like, oh my gosh. And then Bodie Miller was the second skier. You hope when you go to a situation like that you're going to have like 10 chances before the U.S. guy comes down. And he was the second one. And I thought, I was so nervous. And you only have, I didn't have the Sony camera that shoots 24 frames a second. I had a camera that's probably shot 8 frames a second. So.
What's this?
Guy who finished first and thought, I'll try and be a showboat, and walk on my hands. Olympic athletes are a different breed. They really are.
How about this one?
This was at the end of one of the training routines, and I was walking out, and I happened to look over, and I thought, oh my gosh, look at those rings. And so I went back in and spent another few minutes before I left to try and get something that was different. At the Olympics, it's all about the logos. You have to show that it's the Olympics.
Question. Does anybody have a question down here? We're going to move into, the camera, go ahead and take the mic over. Let's show a couple of the Obama pictures that how long did you cover him?
I covered him all 8 years. I covered, again, I was on the Hillary campaign, so I didn't cover much of his campaign in 2008. And I had been on Hillary for a long time, and finally, editor said, hey, you want to go over to Senator Obama? And I was like, sure. Yeah, he seems to be pretty cool. So I had been out with Hillary. I went over, and I remember calling Kate and saying, I have a feeling this guy's going to be our next president. The crowds were bigger. They were more diverse. He had a unique, charisma about him.
Did he ever take a bad picture?
Never took a bad picture. Even this, it was just funny.
Question.
Hi, my name is Sam, and I'm a senior. I have a dual degree from psychology and public relations. My question is, you take such sensitive pictures. Have you ever been criticized for them? Did you have the Republicans breathing down your neck after the Nancy Pelosi picture?
Oh, yeah. So, yes, I have been. It's a good question, because the one that comes to mind, anything I put on Twitter now, things are so polarized. You either love Donald Trump or you hate Donald Trump. And people will criticize me for that. Probably the most heat I've taken recently, or before that, was on the 50th anniversary of Selma. President Obama went down to walk across the bridge, and it was a big ceremony, thousands of people there. The White House went to great lengths to have a truck for the White House press corps, so we could ride across as the president walked. Here it is. Very good timing, Connie. And this picture said it all. And it really, I had a remote camera put up on the truck that shot a little wider scene. I was really focused on the president, but Bush 43 was also there. So he did not have a big role in it, but it was nice of him to be there. I knew him personally. I covered him for 8 years. But unfortunately, in this picture, if you look on the lower right, there is a line in this, in the marker. This is a dual lane, not a highway, but 2 lanes on each side going north, 2 lanes on the other side going. President Bush chose to go all the way over there. So he was still in the front. It was too wide. They have the scissor lifts in the background. Of course, picture was on the front page of the New York Times, and everybody attacked me for cropping out George Bush. I was like, I did not crop him out. It was not, the same image did not have the same impact. Yes, he was there. And so there were a lot of battles back and forth, emails from people, total strangers, phone call, hate mail, everything about why did you crop out George Bush? And I went to speak, and somebody brought it up there too and saying, I'm really offended that you cropped him out. I said, I didn't see him other than when in the beginning, but at the end, he was there. And, somebody rightfully said, listen, George Bush had 8 years to walk across that bridge as president. Here's Barack Obama walking across for the 40th or 50th anniversary. George Bush could have done the same thing when he was president, but he didn't. Now he's ex-president. And even Bush had people asked him about it later. He didn't care.
You're known for your aerial shots.
I am. I love them. Bird's eye view.
And these end up in the paper. And the next one we're going to see is a shot of you at the, I believe it's at the Comey hearing.
Oh, yeah. Former FBI director.
How do you do this?
So basically I take, obviously I'm not on stilts. I'm not standing on a ladder. But I take a monopod, which is something a lot of photographers have. And it extends up about 10 to 12 feet. And I love to take up and put the camera up, pre-focus. I practice a little bit. I practice for this shot. And I stand behind all the other press photographers just to try and show you what the room actually looks like. You know what he looks like when he sits behind the table, but I'm trying to give a reader and to show how much, drama can be in the room. So I put it way up, and then I fire it with a pocket wizard or a cord that allows me. And with this camera, I can flip down the screen so I can look and frame it a little better. And again, that's the same thing here with the
Kathleen Sebelius. How about the one here in the Oval Office? Do you have a tougher time with getting permission to do this?
Not necessarily for this. The Secret Service, the first time I brought it in, we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're worried about it falling and hitting the president. I'm like, it's no different than one of the boom mics. So, you have that, but they're like, that's a lot heavier. You got to be careful. So there's a lot of negotiation that goes on with the staff and the Secret Service. Something like this, I just put it in and went after it. It came out fine, shows a little bit. The next picture that you'll see, if you look on the mantelpiece, there was a green ferns up there, and I negotiated with the White House staff, and it went as high as the president to say, okay, we'll try this once. So I asked if I could put a camera up on the mantle with a wide-angle lens to show what it looks like. The staff liked it, the president liked it, the White House photographer helped me with it, and it worked. And so it gives you a view of what the Oval Office looks like when the president's speaking. I'm actually in the picture over on the left, just above the lamp.
Is that why you do this? So you put yourself in
Yeah, exactly.
There's
got to get in something.
There's a series here next of some famous shots that everybody will remember on 9/11. And where were you?
Wow, probably the most memorable. Everybody's, will ask sometimes, what's the most memorable thing you've done in your career? This is by far one of those memorable things I've ever done. I was working for the Associated Press, covering Bush on 9/11. Back then, there was always a theme for every administration. This would happen to be No Child Left Behind. We were in Florida. President's in a classroom. We were driving up to the classroom to, the president was going to meet with these kids. Basically nice pictures beforehand. Then he would go in and make remarks about No Child Left Behind. And we drove up to the school. And back then, believe it or not, we didn't have cell phones. We had beepers. And the White House staffer who was sitting in the front of the van had a bag phone. The bag phone rang, said, and he was being told by somebody back at the White House that there had been a plane crash in New York. And that may, come up. And that somebody may be talking, they may get asked about that. And he was, how big's the plane crash? Or how many people, And they were saying, oh, no, it's just a small plane crash in New York City. So we thought, okay, all right, nothing to it. We go into the classroom. The president looks pretty much at ease, talking to the children. Next thing you know, something rarely ever happens. Chief of Staff Andy Card walks in the room. He's standing on the side of the classroom. And look over at Andy. I had a relationship with Andy because I covered his dad as President Bush 41. He worked for Andy Card, or Andy Card worked for Bush 41. So when Andy walked in the room, I kind of made eye contact with him with some of the reporters. Again, there's 25 media in the room, in this classroom, maybe more. And I said, what's going on? What's going on? And he said, he just flashed 2. I didn't know what 2 meant. So didn't know until hours later what he really meant by 2. But he's whispering in the president's ear, Mr. President, a second aircraft has just hit the World Trade Center. America's under attack. And we didn't find, I asked Andy, that Friday when we went to New York City, what he had actually told the president. And to hear those words now, it even gives me chills. Because, obviously it changed his entire administration. It changed the way you and I live our lives every day. That day has changed on a lot of fronts. This was, going back out to Air Force One, to see soldiers running around with M16s. You're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. There has been a huge terrorist attack. Jump back on Air Force One. Normally you got on Air Force One, you call up on the phone, hey, I want to watch Fargo again, or I want to watch this, or I want to watch a movie. We had never seen live television at this point on Air Force One. Now we see it all the time. But this was the first time we had seen actual news and CNN on the plane. We were watching Twin Towers on fire. These are reporters back in the press cabin watching. Incredible day. So we flew from Florida to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. And the president made an address to the nation there. And then from there, we went to Barksdale Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, where he went to the underground bunker. And then he, as you all have read and know, that he wanted to get back to Washington. When we flew back to Washington on Air Force One, by this time, the press pool of 13 was down to 5. The White House chose 5 people to be on the plane. I was the AP photographer. They chose the AP photographer, AP reporter, the CBS camera, CBS sound person, and 1 print reporter. And we flew back to on Air Force One with the president. That picture of the plane, or the fighter jets, when we were flying back, the Air Force pilots came back and said, listen, we're the only aircraft in the country in the air right now. There's going to be F-16s on our wings. And of course, I wanted to see that. So and they said, oh no, they're going to be too far off. They'll be behind us, don't worry. And then one of the Air Force police came over and tapped me on the shoulder and said, you got to come back to the plane on the other side of the aircraft. And I looked out the window and I started taking pictures. And the fighter jets were so close to the wings of Air Force One that I could see his face. And he saluted us, gave us a thumbs up, and off he went. And it was surreal to think that's how serious the attack was. And that's, where we were now, to see Air Force One being escorted back to Andrews Air Force Base with fighter jets. And we flew over the Pentagon. The president wanted to see it himself, so we did a flyby over did a tilt, looked down, we could see, the Pentagon on fire, still smoldering, that's when it really hits you, that, because at that point you can't really feel it, you can only see it on the plane, but to fly back and then see it, was amazing. We got back, first thing that the president did, meet with staff, and then address the nation. This was right after his address to the nation that night from the Oval Office. And then next few days were remarkable days too, to be in the Oval Office to see the president cry. First time he had ever cried. I think first time I had ever seen a president cry in the Oval Office, and he was talking about the victims, and he was talking about getting revenge, and he wanted to make sure that the American people knew, that we were going to get back at these guys. And to see him get emotional, we flew up to New York. 3 days later to Ground Zero. There he is with Giuliani, who was the governor at the time, and the mayor behind him, Pataki. And there he is at Ground Zero, standing on, all the windows were all blown out, the buildings had collapsed. He's standing on a fire truck right there with a firefighter. He's standing on a hook and ladder fire truck that is down at 3 feet. That's how far it had been smashed down. You couldn't even recognize it being a fire truck. And so then he called him up, and then he grabbed somebody, handing him this flag. Photographer Win McNamee and I were the only ones down there. We had weaseled our way all the way down in with the help of one of Bush 43's staffers, Bruce Anka, who was like, I'm adamant about getting you guys in front of the press, because everybody else was kept back. And he just grabbed us and said, let's go. And we're fighting through all the crews and, all the firefighters and everybody else. We got down there and it was just like, oh my gosh. And we never used strobes. And I had a flash, turned the flash on because it was very backlit. You could still see the smoke. I mean, the smoke on the left is still 4 or 5 days later, that's where the president is. And that's, and they took the AP picture on the cover of Time that week.
Let's thank Doug Mills, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you,
Obviously.
Dan.